Good evening and welcome to the Bangalore International Centre for this evening's lecture by Pepita Seth on the Theyyams of Malabar, titled The Gods Who Come Down from Heaven. Over the past 50 years, Pepita Seth has devoted her life to the exploration of the closed worlds of the Guruvayur temple and the Theyyam rituals in Kerala. She's undertaken her work with remarkable dedication and stamina in extraordinarily demanding circumstances, whether living with the Theyyam community or observing, documenting, and photographing rituals of the Theyyam and of the Guruvayur temple. Pepita Seth first visited India in 1970. After several years, she became drawn to Kerala and eventually based herself in Thrissur, where she now lives. She's written and lectured extensively on Kerala's traditions and had exhibitions of her photographs in India, Britain, and the United States. In 1981, she received official permission to enter Kerala's temples, and she's been photographing Theyyam since the early 1990s. Her book, Heaven on Earth, The Universe of Kerala's Guruvayur Temple, was published in 2009, and In God's Mirror, The Theyyams of Malabar, was published in December 2023 by Scala. She's also published 2 novels, The Spirit Land and The Edge of Another World. In 2012, the Indian government awarded her the Padma Shri. In October 2023, she was awarded the Sir Richard Burton Medal by the Royal Asiatic Society in London for her life's work in Kerala. We are honored that Pepita Seth has made the journey from Kerala to come and speak to us. And we are very grateful to Jaya Mani, who brought her here by car and has been instrumental in bringing this program to the BIC and taking care of so many arrangements. Thank you. A couple of announcements. For those of you who are here for the first time, the BIC is an inclusive and neutral platform for informed conversation, arts, and culture. You can sign up for email notifications of our programs on our website. And finally, please make sure your mobile phones are switched off or turned on silent mode. And with that, I would like to invite Pepita Seth on stage.
Always rather frightening when you can't see who's down there, so I hope you're friendly. So I start. Yes. Since none of my work has been done under the auspices of an established institution, I feel I should explain my background. I grew up on a farm in Suffolk, in England, the child of busy parents who believed that a higher education for girls was a total waste of time and that my schooling should stop at the age of 15. Although when the time came I was expected to become a secretary, I subversively managed to join a small film company where I could be trained as a film editor, a career I pursued until India came along. This eventually happened when, soon after my mother's death in 1968, the clearing out of an attic produced my great-grandfather's diary containing his description of the 1857 march from Calcutta to Lucknow. However, despite setting out 2 years later to retrace his route, the diary ultimately served as the device which eventually led me to another and very different India. The transition from northern to southern Kerala was casually triggered by someone describing how Kerala's temples honor their deities with processions of musicians and elephants. The problem was that I initially had no more than a tenuous concept of what that entailed. Yet my extraordinary luck was to then meet people who not only sensed where my interests lay, but took me seriously enough to introduce me to their world. While nothing can be proved, I believe that at least part of my response to India was triggered by a certain aspect of my early childhood in post-war England, where almost everyone walked everywhere and worked on the land. Although few of them had travelled or even seen the sea a mere 20 miles away, they could all tell stories that opened my eyes to other worlds, ones that whispered not only of ghosts, witches, and long-dead kings, but of Black Shuck, Suffolk's famous dog of Iloman. I was therefore not entirely surprised when soon after I reached Kerala, I was given some serious advice, namely, what I should do if I found myself being chased by yakshis, the spirits of murdered women who haunt crossroads, waiting to kill and drink the blood of lonely travellers. In the old days, people would run onto the land or property owned by the royal families. However, since times had changed, I was instructed to run onto Indian government property, such as a hospital, a school, or even a railway station. By eventually settling in central Kerala's small town of Thrissur, I gradually became familiar with the annual festivals that drew vast and enthusiastic crowds. Yet despite their splendour, I was ultimately more affected by the intimate rituals and pujas performed to honour the divine in remote areas where electricity was unknown. Sorry about this, yes. My introduction to Theyyam finally came when the now defunct Illustrated Weekly of India published a short article with a handful of photographs. I was intrigued and cut them out, using them to press people for further details. Yet to my amazement, even those who had heard about Theyyam could provide little more than vague details. Nowadays, it is hard to recall that one's locality was once one's whole world, and that very little was known about what was going on elsewhere. For instance, as far as Theyyam is concerned, its heartland, Kannur district, is a 6-hour train journey away from Thrissur. However, eventually, whether by divine accident or design, I was introduced to a man who had recently been transferred from the northern town of Bangalore to Thrissur. As soon as he began talking to me, he mentioned that in just over a week's time, huge Theyyam festival at Kalaripayattu was to be conducted after a gap of 60 years, and that several rare Theyyams would be seen. There was no hesitation. A few days later, and accompanied by a willing friend, I set out to see Theyyam. The year was 1984. Since Theyyam will now start moving to centre stage, I feel an explanatory statement would help. While the word Theyyam is a corruption of deiva, meaning quite simply God, it refers to both a deified individual and a particular style of worship, in which a formless deity is said to be called down from heaven. The concept is that this deity then occupies the body of a designated individual, a man who not only belongs to a particular family, but has undergone the preparatory process which will not only enable the deity to be carried, but to see and act with his or her devotees. While the vast majority of all Theyyams wear elaborate costumes and have intricately made-up faces, there are also some masked exceptions. I should also add that Theyyams are traditionally divided into 3 groups: those who are divine and descended directly from heaven, those who suddenly appear, and the dead ones, deified mortals. In fact, most Theyyams not only belong to this last group, but reflect the diversity of the region's population, since despite coming from a wide range of different castes, they also include deified ancestors, warrior heroes, several wronged women, a deified policeman, various spirits and forest deities, along with tigers, monkeys, snakes, and even, in one small shrine, a divine crocodile. There are also a handful of Muslim Theyyams, one of whom, the dignified Bapirian, came to the aid of a young Brahmin girl when she set out to find her 6 brothers, all of whom had been drowned in a stormy sea. Here I would like to make a slight pause and explain that there are several different words for those holding the right to carry a Theyyam. To avoid uneasy explanations, I will use the word Theyyakkaran, literally meaning Theyyam man, whenever I refer to those who belong in Theyyam's universe. The effect of my first experience of seeing Theyyam was such that my only recognizable thought was to wonder about the Theyyakkaran's inner consciousness when what I could see on the outside was so remarkable. For almost a week, I watched a magical and powerful world go by, utterly riveted by its presence. Of course, I immediately wanted to see more, a wish that was soon fulfilled where I arrived at a shrine where I not only saw Muchulota Bhagavati, one of Theyyam's most important and beautiful deities, but met Lakshmanan Peravanan, who was carrying the goddess, accompanied by members of his extended family. Yet even though I continued to attend other Theyyam festivals, I instinctively knew I would never be able to understand the complexities or unravel what was actually happening. All I could do was accept that Theyyam not only consisted of untold layers, but that even when the same deity was seen in other shrines, their behavior would invariably be completely different. As soon as I had forced myself to reluctantly accept that Theyyam was beyond me, I returned to Thrissur. A few days later, I made the 45-minute bus ride to Guruvayur to visit one of India's most famous temples. As I entered, I was almost immediately greeted by two senior members of the Devasam, the committee which runs the temple. During the course of our conversation, one of them said, "Why do you never take photographs here? You do so in every other Kerala temple." I replied that I didn't think taking photographs in Guruvayur was an option. The man smiled and agreed that I was right, that it was not an option, but that it would be for me. The result of this somewhat unexpected permission was that I began working on a book about Guruvayur temple. Although it took 7 years to complete, they were years that enclosed me in a separate universe. The great plus being that my immersion in the temple not only grounded me, but ensured that the necessary foundation would be in place if I later decided to attempt Theyyam. In any case, when I occasionally went up to Kerala's northern region of Malabar, I always wound up taking photographs. This not only meant a considerable lessening of stress, but that I drew closer to many more Theyyakkarans and their families. What was extraordinary was how effortlessly they inducted me into their world, since they are not generally at ease with outsiders, especially women. My suspicion is that during my early years of photographing some of the lesser-known rituals and ceremonies in Thrissur district, I had become familiar and at ease with local traditions, customs, and social practices. Meanwhile, as I began to draw closer to committing myself, I sensed that other people, namely those closely affiliated with Theyyam's inner world, were also making judgments and considering decisions. On one occasion, when it became known that I had a folder of photographs, I was instructed to bring them to a Theyyam festival where several knowledgeable Theyyakkarans would be present. Although I kept dreaming up numerous excuses to sidestep this request, convinced that showing the photographs would result in me being found out, I finally handed the folder to the two men I found waiting for me when I arrived. 2 days later, the folder was given back to me with a short comment, "You know the moment." However, despite there being a marked change in attitude, one senior Theyyakkaran announced that he could see right through me, while another man, considered to be a walking encyclopedia on all aspects of Theyyam, said that when, years ago, he had first seen me, he knew I would commit myself to Theyyam. While in effect it seems that I never had a choice, it was at this point that everything began changing. Soon after the Guruvayur book was finished, I asked a very senior Theyyakkaran why I was being helped. He answered that since, by that time, I had known them for about 7 years, I knew who they were and what was important to them. This statement was followed by a slight pause and a bleak smile before he said that, of course, They had also known me for 7 years. Lastly, and after an even longer pause and a much bleaker smile, he said, "And the other thing is, you aren't doing a PhD." It was around this time that Lakshmanan Peravanan insisted that I must stay with his family, since only then would I absorb and learn. It was also when the idea of doing a book on Theyyam started being discussed as a serious possibility, which gradually shifted towards becoming a reality. While suggestions were made, lists of deities were assembled, and various shrines visited to ensure divine support. When I first saw Theyyam in the 1980s and 90s, photography was strictly controlled, since the shrine authorities were always reluctant to allow it. Actually, their reticence was correct, since as Theyyam's focus is on ritually honoring a deity, it cannot be considered a performance, a dance, or an art form. Technically, people attend Theyyam festivals to see the deities and get their blessings and/or have their problems solved. Sadly, in today's increasingly urbanized world, Theyyam is now all too often viewed as a ready-made photo opportunity, with absolutely no respect or basic awareness being shown. Inevitably, there is concern about the present situation. One young chenda player demonstrated as he forcibly expressed his emotions, almost shouting that this isn't Theyyam, it's a reality show. It is hardly surprising that major changes came with the proliferation of mobiles. With a couple of rare exceptions, it became impossible to stop photography, which in turn brought about a situation where everyone just accepted that people were going to take photographs. Inevitably, this has created somewhat volatile situations where some deities react by grabbing mobiles and hurling them into the far distance and, if possible, into water. It should perhaps be noted that there are no comebacks when dealing with how a Theyyam behaves, the convention being that since it is the deity who speaks and acts, the Theyyakkaran is completely absolved from all responsibilities. However, it is also worth adding that since almost all Theyyakkarans are known for their sharp tongues and phrases, politicians, for instance, tend to give them a very wide berth. Despite the general belief that Theyyam usually takes place within a shrine's compound, certain aspects of it are also seen in or near a Theyyakkaran's house. Although every year is punctuated with various pujas and rituals performed to honor or even placate a deity, they are generally for the well-being of their families. Other pujas are conducted on behalf of families living nearby, people who have prayed and made offerings to please a deity. In this instance, either Potam Theyyam, or one of Theyyam's most important deities, or Guligan, an uneasy and unknowable deity of immense power. There are also the annual pujas performed to commemorate those whose fathers have died. As far as the Theyyakkaran Mulipanika is concerned, honoring his father's death anniversary is of extreme importance. Although Mulipanika often conducts regular ceremonies and pujas within his house, it is also where local men and women come to consult him. In fact, to be more precise, these people, hailing from diverse backgrounds and belonging to different communities, are brought to the house by their relatives, since the belief is that they are being troubled by various uneasy spirits. Mulipanika is not only a senior member of the Malayan community, but respected for being able to alleviate their unhappy troubles. What always impressed me was just how attentively he not only listened, but how he explained everything to the afflicted patients' worried relatives. Many of his patients are Muslims, some of whom come to his house, while others ask Muli to go to theirs. By this stage, I had finally clarified my doubts and acknowledged not only my personal feelings about Theyyam, but become all too conscious that, like so many forms of traditional life, it was under considerable threat. Ironically, its exterior splendor, the costumes and headdresses, are almost part of the problem, with outsiders and tourist guides persistently promoting it as dance, studiously and deliberately ignoring that it is actually a ritual, an act of worship, and that when people approach a Theyyam, it is to make offerings and receive blessings. All this is of concern to every Theyyakkaran, since they are all well aware of what is happening, that the market forces eddying around them are unconcerned about the role Theyyam has played for nearly 2,000 years. It was then that it finally dawned on me that I actually had no right to back out, since guidance would be available from within. And so it happened that with the support of Lakshmanan Peravanan, Murli Panika and their families and so many others that I began, deeply conscious of not only the difficulties I would face, but the seriousness of my responsibilities. While I was all too conscious that a book was unlikely to change anything, Lakshmanan's contention was that at least the truth would be available. While the vast majority of devotees will approach the Theyyam to receive blessings, there are many others who seek direct interaction with them. Invariably, they revolve around the devotee wanting advice about matters which can range from the whereabouts of a lost bangle to a child's health or family problems or many other things. Despite being far less common, it is not unheard of for a deity to initiate a conversation. The first time this happened to me was as I approached the goddess Patamatagi Bhagavati to make my offering. As I bent down, she reached up and pulled me closer, saying, "You should never think it was your decision to do this work. It was not. It was our decision." The next time a deity made the first move was when Kuriti, who is actually Parvati, Shiva's consort, caught me completely by surprise. I was standing well back, conscious not only of her smallness and extraordinary lightness, but that she is one of my very favorite deities. However, I suddenly realized that she was running in my general direction. Aware that Theyyams expect people to move aside, I did exactly that, only to see that she was now more obviously heading towards me. Somewhat confused, I then stood with folded hands as she came right up to me and without further ado, hugged me. Next, she took the little brush she always carries and began sweeping the bad things away from me, coming so close that I could feel her breath. Finally, having apparently finished dusting me down, she revealed herself as a divine and caring mother, as she began miming that she was breastfeeding me, her eyes dilating and her body shivering. Then quite suddenly, and with one last dusting, she was done. Theyyam's initial impact is visual, created by the costumes and headdresses that come in a vast range of shapes and sizes, all of which effectively remove any evidence of a mere mortal. One day, when Lakshmana was talking about Theyyam's costumes, he laughed, telling me that outsiders believes he buys everything from a shop. It was at this point that a sobering reality began to emerge, that despite Theyyam being somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 years old, the place of honor is held by Kathakali, which is said to have evolved about 400 years ago, and is undoubtedly Kerala's best-known performing art. The major difference, however, is that Kathakali's costumes and headdresses are made by specialists, whereas absolutely everything except the decorative silver, bell metal, or even gold ornaments worn by a Theyyam are made by its Theyyakkarans, who must not only know how to make the complex headdresses from a wide range of different woods and materials, but transform various appliqued cloths into a whole range of costumes that will be worn by numerous different Theyyams. Generally speaking, every deity has two stages, the first one being the preliminary form, which is known as a totem, and where the Theyyakkaran has a small red headdress and wears a red costume. The powerful male deities, often warrior heroes, are vigorous, their preliminary forms being known as velatams, their elaborate costumes resembling a full Theyyam. When people ask questions about a Theyyam's costumes, there is always a slight pause followed by a short laugh. Only then does someone admit that no such garment exists. Instead, Theyyams are dressed in a judicious assembly of several different pieces. In one deity's case, her extraordinary costume consists of more than 40 separate pieces. For sheer hard work, nothing rivals the process of making the 5-tiered layers that collectively allow numerous Theyyams to run, leap, and jump. Each set is made to order based on the height and girth of the Theyyakkaran. Each section is tied around the waist, the longest one reaching to just above the ankles, all other layers being increasingly shorter. The protracted and laborious process of preparing them begins with stitching borders onto lengths of lined cloth. This is followed by boiling starch to the consistency of glue, waiting for it to cool down, and then energetically rubbing it into each piece. Once the excess has been completely scraped off all 5 lengths, they are placed in bright sunlight until they are stiff and dry. Lastly, they are folded into a series of knife-edged pleats, another painstaking procedure since, after each individual pleat has been made, the whole length has to be flipped over to make the next pleat, and so on, backwards and forwards. When finished, each section is tightly bound to keep its shape. While a full set can last for at least several years, it has to be periodically restarched. The frequency of doing this entirely depends on how long the stiffness lasts. Although most Theyyakkarans probably do so annually, Lakshmana is so busy that he has 4 complete sets since he has no time to restarch during the season. It is in the construction of the Tirumudi, the sacred headdress worn by the goddess Muchalotta Bhagavati, that Lakshmanan's extraordinary skills are on display. However, the great irony is that the goddess's devotees never see this frame, since by the time the Bhagavati comes before them, its breathtaking structure has been covered by a fitted cloth. Yet such is the precision and beauty of this frame that the outside world would probably look upon it as a work of art. Certainly being able to follow its painstaking creation was to watch a master at work. During the 3 weeks that Lakshmanan spent making this intricate frame, he never faltered or measured or corrected. When I asked him how many such headdresses he had made, he said this was his 4th, and he had learned simply by watching his father. The visual range of the many different headdresses used by several male deities is extensive, many being fashioned out of sculptured wood, invariably with interlocking sections so that they can be dismantled and carried from home to shrine and back again. Here the decorative element is provided by cutting red, white and black metallic paper, often into the finest slivers, and then pasting it onto the carved wooden pieces. However, as might by now be expected, nothing in Theyyam is ever used for purely decorative reasons, since absolutely everything has an inner meaning. Inevitably, the same rationale applies where Theyyam's makeup, its face writing, is concerned. The intricate and delicate designs painted on the face are never purely decorative. Every line has its own reason and purpose, the design indicating different aspects of the deity. It also means that numerous small details must be attended to, since the belief is that what is not done or wrongly done will adversely affect the deity, the festival, and the locality. It also has to be borne in mind that these rulings must not only accommodate the shapes of different faces, but do so without violating the design. No shape or color changes can be made to the rules laid down for each and every Theyyam. So strict is this ruling that breaking it would once again mean that the result was not the deity. Another of the major differences between Theyyam and Kathakali is that the Theyyakkaran will himself sing the songs detailing a Theyyam story. In effect, the Theyyakkaran must possess a whole host of skills. He must know kalaripayattu, Kerala's martial art form, since it is used by the warrior deities. Be an expert at exorcising and the giving of blessings. Be able to play various drums, know how to make the costumes, do the face writing, and above all know the songs associated with individual deities, some of which can last for 15 hours. However, the sad fact is that despite possessing all this knowledge and extraordinary and multiple skills, Theyyam does not provide them with enough to live on. Almost everyone has to make a living by other means. Nowadays, this tends to be as the owner-driver as an auto rickshaw, since it protects them from having to take leave from a proper job to carry a Theyyam. When people first see Theyyam, they want to know how many Theyyams exist. The answer is immediate and consistent, that there used to be around 450 Theyyams, of whom roughly 250 are still being honoured. However, despite this being the default answer, when I decided to list every Theyyam I heard about, I finally stopped at 897. While the convention is that the divine can never be counted, there is also the fact that some Theyyams are known by different names in different places. Nowadays, a new but increasingly common question asks, how long will Theyyam survive? I first heard this question 39 years ago, when the answer was 10 to 15 years. The last time I heard the question, a year or so ago, the answer was still 10 to 15 years. Yet just recently, someone said it will happen when not enough people know how to make the costumes. This suggests something much darker, since, like the face writing, everything must be done properly, otherwise it simply isn't the deity. Generally, most Theyyams start being dressed for their preliminary rituals in the late afternoon. This in turn means that the full form of the deity, the actual Theyyam, is often prepared in the early hours of the morning, resulting in almost no one being able to sleep. Yet despite the surrounding tension and exhaustion, everyone works with dedication and precision, everything always being meticulously checked. One of Theyyam's many truths suggests that it is surrounded by slippery ambiguity. A perfect example of this aspect was precisely illustrated when, during a particular Chamundi's preliminary ritual, she aggressively hit a man, who retaliated by demanding that the police be called. Although they came, as far as those present were concerned, Chamundi's actions were justified. The man had offended her. Since by then the preliminary rituals were over, the shrine authorities decided to see what Chamundi's Theyyakkaran had to say. By then he was relaxing in the temporary shelter primarily used for makeup and dressing. The aggrieved man shouted at him, demanding to know why he had been hit. The Theyyakkaran was taken aback by the accusation, saying he knew nothing about the incident. Although the shouting increased, the Theyyakkaran eventually raised a hand and everyone fell silent. When, he asked, did this happen? At night, around 11 o'clock. The Theyyakkaran smiled and shook his head. Then it's not possible, he said, since at that time I was here and asleep, clearly revealing that since it is the deity who uses the Theyyakkaran's body, he is therefore said to be sleeping. The police summarily threw the man out. While what now follows is a much sadder story, the Theyyakkaran's identity and presence is once again ignored. Everything beginning with a woman approaching a Theyyam in tears, sobbing as she explains that her husband is an alcoholic, her children have no food, and she simply cannot cope. The Theyyam takes her hands and talks to her, soothing and finally blessing her. She turns and walks away, temporarily at least at peace. The extraordinary irony was that although the Theyyakkaran was actually the woman's husband, she held to the belief that her interaction was with the deity. While many of the skills required for Theyyam must be specially taught, much is passively absorbed simply by growing up in an atmosphere where Theyyam pervades and where learning starts at a young age, disguised as play. Traditionally, an oil lamp is lit at dusk for people to do their evening worship. In a Theyyam house, this is also when a child starts learning his first totem, the song detailing a Theyyam story. At one time, the guru would sing a few lines and ask the child to repeat them again and again until they were committed to memory, more could be added, until, almost effortlessly, the whole song was learned. Nowadays, however, much has changed, since the song is usually either written down or recorded on a mobile, leaving the child to learn by himself with occasional inputs from the guru. Sometimes, when children are playing, invariably as a Theyyam, they are watched by their fathers and uncles, who will eventually call the children and demonstrate a stance or explain some steps, suggesting that they try a few. All this encouraged them, and, as with the gradual absorbing of a totem, steps are learned and others added, without the children having any awareness of being instructed. Physical preparation is absolutely essential, since a Theyyam often has to not only carry considerable weight, but stand for long hours. Again, much has changed. The Theyyakkarans who now own auto rickshaws or even vans can transport themselves and their costumes to the shrines, while until relatively recently everyone walked everywhere, with even small boys being expected to carry at least one bag, while the younger men carried the costumes and headdresses of the senior Theyyakkarans, putting a bag on their shoulders and bearing the woven basket containing accessories on their heads. This was all part of their training, ensuring that they gained the physical strength to support a headdress. Everything needed for a Theyyam is carried in small sections and reassembled at the shrine, beginners learning the correct process by acting as helpers. Just prior to beginning the song detailing the deity's story, a young boy will be given a long-handled oil lamp and told to stand near the Theyyam. Regardless of how tired he feels, he must not move. In this way, the learning process, passive and otherwise, gradually bears fruit. While beginners learn the songs and steps, they also become tuned to standing, their strength and stamina increasing as they eventually acquire sufficient physical strength to perform a small Theyyam. One of the many skills a Theyyakkaran must master is a complete understanding of weight distribution, especially when a goddess manifests her presence whilst wearing a towering headdress. The reason is that despite appearances, they are not completely supported on the head. Instead, the weight is borne by the shoulders, the back, the waist, and even the legs. Since some headdresses can soar to around 15 meters, the slightest breeze will force the body to move. To cope with these circumstances, newcomers must be taught the required techniques by experienced men, that when wearing a big headdress, the legs which should be specially angled with the body maintaining a certain looseness, devoid of tension, yet not completely at ease, with the shoulders level in order that the combined weight of the body and the headdress can be evenly distributed, making for a strong overall stance. Before a high headdress is placed, it has to be lifted up by assistants in order for the goddess to see its front side. Only after this has been done and acknowledged is it turned round and carefully positioned. There is a story about one of the senior Cherakal Rajas waiting to see the highest, widest and heaviest headdress being put on the Theyyam of the presiding deity of a shrine belonging to the Cherakal royal family. At that precise moment, the Raja asked the deity why, with her powers, she couldn't do it herself. Without a word, the goddess reached out a hand, took the huge and enormously heavy headdress, turned it round and placed it. She then looked at the Raja and told him she never wanted to see him again. To date, now 200 years later, no senior Raja has been allowed to enter her shrine. Since many of the deities who spin, turn, and dip at speed wear great round headdresses, it seems reasonable to assume that their Theyyakkarans receive specialized training. However, the truth is that although spinning is practiced, it is not done while wearing a headdress, since what the Theyyakkaran actually needs to know is where and how to place his hands. Of course, when he eventually wears such a headdress for the first time, he is closely watched by senior Theyyakkarans. Afterwards, his efforts are evaluated, the focus being on whether the headdress was correctly held and the technique of weight distribution observed. The older Theyyakkarans will share their expertise with the beginner, assuring him that he will soon learn, improve, and become an expert. But then, and almost as an aside, there will be a quiet comment about the trance stage, indicating that it wasn't the Theyyakkaran who was spinning, it was the Bhagavati, the goddess, and that training and technique are therefore irrelevant, since the Theyyakkaran has no recollection of what he did. He will say he doesn't know how he finished, despite being told that it was a very good Theyyam. Two things then become clear: that no one practices spinning with a headdress because it is not worn by the Theyyakkaran, but by the deity, and that although training helps, in the end that is not enough. What really counts is the presence of the deity. While almost nothing is openly said about the transition from a mere mortal to a god, it is made possible by how Theyyam is structured, that the preliminary stages prepare the Theyyakkaran to carry the deity within himself, even as he is, as it were, put to sleep during the time that the deity uses his body, the merger making them mutually happy, creating a kind of divine madness. As already mentioned, there is no consensus about the exact number of Theyyams. There is also the fact that they come in all shapes and sizes. I have therefore chosen to end with just 3, the first because of her uniqueness, the second because of her Theyyam's extraordinary story, and finally Gulagan, who, if he is present, is always the last Theyyam. It is said that one day, a long time ago, 7 goddesses came down from heaven to pick flowers on an island in the middle of a river. One of them, called Vali, wandered off, and since she never reappeared, the others eventually left. Yet the local people heard her crying and took pity on her, making her a small shelter, since she could not bathe and had no clean clothes. She meanwhile prayed to the sage Narada, beseeching his help. When he arrived 3 days later, bringing fresh cloths, she expected to return to heaven. Instead, he asked her to remain on the island as a blessing for its people. When the island shrine celebrates its festival, Vali is just one of the many Theyyams that are honored. However, while her story is slight, her Theyyam is unique, since she is carried by a woman, breaking the accepted rule that only men may do so. The chosen woman, who works as a sweeper in Kannur railway station, has to fulfill several criteria. Among them, that she must be married to a man from one of 3 Malayan families, have completed her menopause, and undergone 41 days penance. The Theyyam may have been stopped at some point, but if so, it was revived in the mid-1980s due to the willingness of the legendary Lakshmi Amma to carry her. At that time, the isolated island could only be reached by taking a country boat across the wide Kupam River. However, as soon as the bridge that now connects it to the mainland was finished, the shrine became famous for its Lady Theyyam. We now turn to one of the most revered and beautiful of all Theyyams, Muchilota Bhagavati. While her concepts are profoundly complex, according to Lakshman, 20 volumes would be required to document every element of her divine persona. Since it took over a week for him to explain her journey down from heaven, depicted by her making 9 rounds of the shrine, it seems a contradiction to say that her story, while tragic, is simple. She was not only devout, intelligent, and beautiful, but the much-loved daughter of a Nambudri Varmin family. When the time came to arrange her marriage, she made one stipulation. She would only marry someone whose knowledge of the sacred texts was greater than hers. However, although many scholars sought her hand, not one of them possessed knowledge superior to hers. As a result, all her would-be suitors turned against her, even as they demanded answers to two questions. One, what is the greatest pleasure? And two, what is the greatest pain? She knowingly sealed her fate, aware that her answers came from innate inner knowledge, as she declared sex to be the greatest pleasure and childbirth the greatest pain. All those present glowed with satisfaction, declaring that such answers could only come from experience. Forced to leave her home, she walked until she reached a small shrine dedicated to Shiva. There, having understood her situation, she committed suicide. Throwing herself onto the fire, she persuaded a passing oil presser to light. Inevitably, she was soon seen as a tragically wronged woman, elevated to divinity and known as Muchalota Bhagavati. One of the pluses of seeing her totem is that since she is almost devoid of makeup, it is possible to see the effect of the process on the Theyyakkaran. While there is a tendency to describe Lakshmanan's face as being mask-like, the assessment is wrong. What is actually seen are the profound depths of a powerful and divine presence. However, as soon as the deity has been prepared and dressed for her Theyyam, all ordinary human characteristics have been erased. All that remains is the concept of her coming down from heaven and being dressed behind concealing cloths. What is then seen is the extraordinary moment when she rises, indicating that she has been reborn on earth, sent there by Lord Shiva. Finally, when the goddess Muchalota Bhagavati comes before her devotees, she is wearing the large tirumudi, the sacred and predominantly red headdress made by her Theyyakkaran, Lakshmanan Paravanan. Furthermore, this is when the great arc of her headdress can be understood to represent the sky, even as its rim bears an interpretation of the flowers seen only in heaven, whilst the three colours, red, black and white, indicate the presence of the three gunas, representing different attributes. Each and every part of this headdress bears witness to an extraordinary and detailed vastness, one that also embraces everything she wears. Since Lord Shiva is aware that the power of her eyes is such that people will be afraid of her, he orders her to wear false eyes in order to protect everyone. Yet as part of her ritual, and while accompanied by assistants, she slowly makes her way to the shrine's well. It is there that, having stared down into its vast depths, that she conceptually enters the well and is able to remove the eyepieces. This then enables her to give them back to Lord Shiva by, again conceptually, throwing them into the well, the belief being that flowing water will return them to him. At this point, the tension running through much of her story is lightened by a set piece of her taking a bath, an episode full of gentle humour which never diminishes either her power nor her dignity, as she stands on a pidam, a large ritual stool, and acts out the cleaning of her teeth, the washing of her hair, and the applying of eye makeup as she dresses and adorns herself. One of the most extraordinary of Theyyam's concepts focuses on the belief that despite Muchalota Bhagavati being Saumya, languid and gentle, her true nature is Raudra, ferocious and aroused. The explanation revolves around her being an avatar of Durga, and that since Durga was in a towering rage when she killed a ferocious asura, all her avatars automatically possess this anger. Yet in Muchalota Bhagavati's case, her Theyyakkaran has the power and right to change her mood to Saumya, the proviso being that just before everything concludes, he must restore her mood back to Raudra. Her ritual ends with her addressing her devotees, not only blessing them, but giving the name of the nearest shrine where she will next be present. Finally, we come to Guligan, a mercurial deity whose character is hard to assess, a trait he explains to his devotees, impressing upon them that he should never be angered, since while his power is unlimited, his undulating hair demonstrates that he moves all over the world. Whenever the Guligan is seen at a festival, he is always the last Theyyam, since he has a tendency to hang around in order to confirm that all is well. The common belief is that while Guligan ceaselessly watches to ensure that all those under his protection are cared for, at the time of the shrine's annual festival, he will roam across the family's property to be certain that everything is in order. Only then will he return to the shrine and interact with his devotees. Although, as already stated, Theyyams rarely initiate a conversation, in this instance Guligan looked at me and asked why I looked so worried. Without waiting for an answer, he continued saying, "Have I ever failed you? Have I not always held both your hands? And on your journey behind us, am I not there? Have you at any time felt that there are obstacles between us? If so, I am here to remove them. We are all with you in what you are doing for us. So don't worry. If there are any problems, just remember me, call me, and I am there." To quote one devotee, Guligan is said to be a very precious god. When the time comes to return Guligan to his shrine or place, there are inherent risks due to him being beyond death, his power being such that the full range of his reactions remains unknown. Therefore, as soon as everything is finished, but before the mask is removed, the Theyyakkaran will inform him that he has been given all that was due to him. Furthermore, it is explained that everything is finishing, not only for the Theyyakkaran, but for the shrine authorities and, moreover, the entire locality. This statement is followed by the request for him to bless everyone and, importantly, not to hurt anyone. The Theyyakkaran then seeks permission to remove the mask in order that everything can be concluded and, crucially, for him to be forgiven for any mistake he may have made, however unintentionally. After repeating this prayer, he requests that no one will be punished. Although traditionally a chicken is then sacrificed, it is becoming increasingly common for a blood substitute known as gurasi to be used. Whilst all the other Theyyams honoured at the shrines also have to be dealt with, the crucial difference with Guligan is, as ever, the apprehension that he might react harshly to any perceived shortcoming. At the same time, it has to be remembered that he acts as the physical protector of houses, shrines, and their precincts, diligently checking for intruders, not only in every nearby nook and cranny, but by running around all four corners of the surrounding land, even climbing trees, to ensure that all is well. For this reason, he is always the last deity to go back, since he needs to check that everyone is happy. In order to do so, he may hide and watch everything. Finally, it is said that even when the mask is removed and the connection broken, his Theyyakkarans often continue to feel his presence, and that several hours may pass before he is truly gone from their bodies. Thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Pepita has kindly agreed to take some questions. A mic will come around to you. We request that you please keep your questions brief and ask a question rather than make a long comment. Yes. Any questions?
Good evening. I'd like to know if the same Theyyakkaran only takes on one deity or does it change? does the Theyyakkaran take on a different deity's form?
Yes, I mean, you can, yeah, I mean, within the allowances in a particular caste.
Okay.
What can I do? Oh, then I can't hear her. Yes, I mean, in a way they're contract. If they go to one shrine, there will be these Theyyams and another shrine, these Theyyams. So as long as the caste is right for it being allowed to perform that deity, then yes. But there are some people, I mean, I know two of them, who can only perform one deity. But they are suitably given enough money to this without.
Other questions? There's one in the back.
That was a really beautiful talk. You just mentioned something about caste. So, is there such a thing that a certain caste person can do a certain deity, or is there a rule or something like that?
Sorry, I can't even see who's talking. But it doesn't really matter. But
yeah, the question is that you mentioned
certain communities can perform certain deities. Now, for instance, Lakshmanan was doing Muchulottabagati. He's a Vanan. Murli Panika is a Malyan. He does Chaumundi. And other. So the different castes are allowed to do, I mean, they do different deities. So, there's some overlapping. The Gooligan is done by 3 different communities.
Madam, I found there are certain characters which the actors, Theyyam characters, are performing that of Muslims, Mapla,
Yes.
Theyyam or something like that. Can you just say a few words on that? There are Muslim characters and
yes,
Theyyam.
but they're all Theyyams, regardless of who. I mean, Muchulottabagudi is a Nambudri Brahmin. So they're all carried by Hindus. I mean, Theyyam people are Hindu.
Yeah, I know.
So it's nothing to do.
But there are Muslim characters coming in the Theyyam performance. Muslim characters.
Well, there's no, yes.
Like performing Azan in North Malabar.
Yes.
Certain there are Theyyam characters who represent the Muslims.
Yes. There are about, to my knowledge, there are at least 10, and one of them is a woman. And there was one shown there, a Bapirian, who is one of a very important deity. But the Theyyakkaran is a Hindu.
I haven't got words, haven't got words to express what this and your talk and your devotion mean, Pepita. I'm just curious about, are there traditions about what materials can be used for different parts of the costume? What kinds of materials can be used for the different
yes,
parts?
That's laid.
And has that changed over time?
Everything is laid down. Everything. Because it ceases to be the deity if the wrong thing is used.
Hi. Can you, or did you come across this version of Guligan called Karim Guligan?
Yes.
Can you just share your
Kara
experience?
Gooligan?
Karim Guligan.
No, I don't think so.
All right.
No.
All right.
There are about 6 different Gooligan. But Kara Gooligan is the one that he has a mask, of course, and he's dressed in the tender coconut leaves, like most Gooligans. But over that, they put a really nasty, it comes from a bush, I think. They wrap it round him, which has the most awful pricks in it. And he then spends his time throwing himself into ditches. The problem is that the assistants have to drag him out. So it's not a very popular.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you so much for such a insightful talk on the Theyyams. My question is, given that it's not generating them the livelihood, right? You're saying it's not an income generating ritual.
No,
So what is it that is driving them to, carry it forward? Is it that because they're born in that family, they kind of, the environment is such that they take it on, or is it the divinity that they experience that pushes them to take it on?
No, I mean, I don't think anybody will push them to take it on. I mean, there are families where not all the men in the family do it, but they all know how to do it. It's people that have a right very often want to keep it because it's a kind of status. I mean, not much respect is given to them, quite frankly. But I mean, you have some status if you carry particular deities, and I mean, Lakshmana is well, it's not Lakshmana, but Lakshmana is very regarded, very, very regarded as a performer, and Murli too. So there is respect for them, no doubt. And, from childhood onwards, as I say, the game, or the children play games, and it's always as becoming a Theyyam. And that little boy who was up like this, he was 3 or something. Already he got it done, he'd got it off pat, in fact. So, and what is happening at the moment is actually quite interesting, because a lot of the young guys actually are very keen to keep it going. But they're also roaming around on motorbikes and things. They know exactly what's going on. And of course, the other thing, of course, is they're all literate. So there's a tremendous flux at the moment. What then happens, I don't know. And the fact that they can now, they for the first time in a way, they have found a way of earning money without it upsetting Theyyam, because they can, if they can get themselves an auto rickshaw, even if there's one day when they're not doing a Theyyam, well, they can go and apply for hire. And they can also take things to the shrines in the things. But it is in flux at the moment, and nobody quite knows what's happening. But there are some young guys who are very determined to carry it forward. And there's one guy I know, he came up to me once and said, could I possibly help him with his English? So I said, yes, but I'm intrigued as to why, So he said, well, because then I can get a job in a bank. And he said, now, there's the reservation for jobs. He said, and I want to get it on my own merits. I don't want to get it because I'm a Malayan. So I said, oh, yes, okay. I said, but just as a matter of interest, what happens if you get the job, which he got, of course, and you work in a bank? And a look of total fear went across his face. He said, I can't give it up. And I mean, there are all kinds of people who are actually Theyyakkarans. I mean, for all I know, he's in the room, but there is a man in Bangalore who works at the aeronautical place here. I mean, he's not doing he's a serious engineer or whatever. He comes back to Malabar once a year to do a very important and extremely dangerous Theyyam, Theyyam. And there are other people that have rights, which if they have a brother, the brother would have the same rights. So as long as somebody in the family is there. But there's one that works in the Gulf who comes back to do Gooligan, a particular Gooligan somewhere. There are others that I know where they have the right, but they have a job elsewhere, sort of thing. But they will come back to do that Theyyam. Now, if they were in Malabar, they would go to other shrines and do Theyyams as well, because it would be more part of some income generation, whereas obviously if you're working in the aeronautical place here, you have to seriously be here. But he comes once a year.
Madam, thank you very much for your very enlightened talk. I am from a village where 1 month we worship Theyyam, 1 month, full month, we worship Theyyam.
Okay,
I am Professor Radhakrishna.
okay.
I am from a village where 1 month we worship Theyyam, where Malayalam, Tulu, and Kannada, what we call Theyyam Aradhana, Bhutaradhana, Daiva is merged. It is a village called Paraje near Sulya Taluk, bordering Malabar. An excellent, unique place of convergence. I have 2 questions to you. Number 1, earlier when I was a kid, I used to see all this makeup, etc. It used to be only from the elements of nature. The color, especially the coconut palm, etc., everything is from nature. But today you find gradually the plastic things have entered. Another thing is the younger generation among them. These community groups are called, especially in our place, Bannas they are called, or Malayas. Now I find the younger generation exposed to modernity, modern education, modern concept, etc., how do they react to this, and will they continue these traditions?
Well, I mean, I haven't seen this, what you're just telling me about, so I can't comment what I haven't seen. I mean, I've just told you what my experience has been in Central Malabar, I suppose. That there is this resurgence of them wanting to do it. But it's under threat, no doubt. Sherry.
Thank you, Pepita, for a most powerful and moving presentation. I was just had a query about the Theyyam who was wearing the metal pieces in the eyes.
Yes.
And also, in the mouth.
Full
and so on.
size, yeah.
Yes, and in the mouth and so on. You don't see that in all the Theyyams.
No,
But was
not
this
at all.
more in the past, or are they still?
No, I mean, every Theyyam has its designated costume, if you like, look. Now, actually, those full size, as they're called, normally they're not worn for very long. Lakshman was telling me there was one Theyyam who has to wear it for about 8 hours, and they have to train because because of the heat generated within in the eyepiece. So normally to avoid that, there's some get-out clause, if you like, where they, like Muchalada Bhagwati, when she goes to the well, she can remove the eyepieces. So that's how they do it there. But in the case of Durvapana, it's different. It's up to 8 or 9 hours they can have them on, but they have to train. They have to start training for it. Once they've done it and then they do it again, it's okay. But otherwise they have to prepare themselves because it's quite dangerous. I mean, they could lose their eyesight. So every Theyyam has its laid down costume, makeup, and everything. Nothing is, why don't we try a red color here? That's not on.
2 questions. One is, have you noticed any pattern or a framework for the performance? Number 1. And number 2, another one, my friends, is you have worked with Theyyam for many long years. Have you experienced any miracle in your life?
Yes. I've given you your answer, but I'm not giving details. It was an extraordinary experience to live with such people for such a long time. And they, as far as I'm concerned, they are really wonderful people. I mean, they call me every day to see if I'm all right. When the pandemic happened, I actually had come down to Trichy, where I ostensibly live, but I can't remember why. And during that time was when they called the first lockdown. So I couldn't go back. So I get a call from Malabar. Are you inside? Yes. Then you are, because they come down out of season, they love coming down, and we all roam off to Guruvayur or whatever and have a good time. And then, so they said, so they know all the shops and everything, and there's a supermarket nearby. So they said, you are to go to the supermarket, you are to buy all these non-perishable, dals and whatever, rice, I can't remember all the other, and then because they know me, and you are to go home, you are to put everything on the ground, and you are to take a photograph and send it to us. So that they knew I'd done. And sometimes they'll just turn up.
Yeah, my name is Sanjay Ketkar. I heard the Theyyam festival season is for about 6-7 months from October this thing. But how long each shrine's Theyyam actually is longer this thing? Because
how long is what? The Theyyam season?
The Theyyam season is quite longer, is what I heard.
End of October to it starts petering out in June. Yes.
Yeah. And then there are multiple Theyyams in that season, correct?
Yes.
But how long each Theyyam, one Theyyam, how long do they dress like this, and then they dance, and then they interact with the people?
That will totally depend on the Theyyam's sort of story, if you like.
Uh-huh.
So, and sometimes there's another thing where a Theyyam has to be done, but how can I word this tactfully? Isn't that important, a Theyyam? So what they do, one person, it's called doing one Theyyam on top of another. One man will just change the muddy or the breastplate or the something and just do 2 seconds of those 3 Theyyams. So that they've been technically satisfied and given an offering, but they're not a big Theyyam.
Thanks for a wonderful session. Like over hundreds of years, I'm sure a lot of things have evolved and changed. And you'd mentioned the chicken sacrifice.
Yes.
Being replaced with some substitute for blood. Could you elaborate on this Theyyam going vegetarian?
Well, there's something called the Animal Rights Act, So they're not supposed to do sacrifices, but I can tell you it's no place to be a chicken. Actually, Murli's house, this is a chicken story for you. Somebody who lived near him was going to the Gulf for 6 months, and he brought a huge chicken to Murli and said, this is going to be my offering to Potham Theyyam, but when I come back from the Gulf, so you can look after the chicken till then. And he was a really beautiful big chicken, and we all got to rather like him. And I was always taking photographs of him. I'm not really sure why. But anyway, the man came back from the Gulf and said, okay, now, maybe the day after tomorrow, if we could have the full sort of kalasham and everything, and of course the chicken. And I said to Murli, no, this is not going to be allowed. He said, Amma, what can I do? Because it's been an offering. So I don't know, I kept half hoping. And then, guess what? He was called Shankaran, this chicken, and he actually somehow ran away. And I thought, great. Then he came back. He actually came back. And again, he went away 3 times and came back. And Murli said, now do you get it? They know what they're there for. And now in Murli's house, because I'm always giving them photographs and everything, and so they have all these photographs around this tiny little house. And the one that always stops people in their track is the one of a chicken. And they say, and then they look and it says Shankaran, world's greatest chicken. So Murli's very proud of having this photograph. Quite right too. Yes. Anybody else? No more chicken stories, I'm afraid.
Heartfelt thanks to Pepita Seth for this very evocative lecture that's brought us to the world of the Theyyams. Her book In God's Mirror is available outside, and Pepita will be signing books. So if you'd like to meet her and sign a book, she'll be outside. Thank you all for coming. Good night.
One minute, please. Where is I need that bag of mine, which you won't let me have. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, it's here. Just inside because I have to read out.
Okay. Hold on, everybody.
Yeah, it won't
There's
take
something
a
to be read out.
No, because, wait.
Hold on, everyone, please.
Right. Now, oh gosh, I wrote it the wrong way round. But what I really want to say, that I'm deeply grateful to everybody that helped me do this project. And I wrote it, I was originally going to put it at the beginning, and now I'll read it as if it is at the end, and at least it'll be coherent, but actually we're now doing it at the end. Before we begin, okay, now that we end, I would like to thank all those who directly ensured that this project was finally finished. As such, I'm deeply grateful to Theyyakkaran and their support, since they not only started the ball rolling, but kept it doing so. I am fortunate to have Jaya Mani as a friend, since her support and enthusiasm were often all that really kept me going. Lastly, I'm immensely grateful to the Bangalore International Centre for providing this wonderful venue, and to Pratiti Balal for making everything happen, and for her unending energy and attention to detail, which has prepared me for the talk I'm about to give, or have given. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now you can go. Hopeless.